Welcome to the WWSD podcast. We are sponsored by Collector's Maze. You can check them out at collectorsmaze.com for all things related to fandom. I'm your host, Josh, and as always, I'm joined by my buddy, Seamus. How's it going, Seamus?
It's going great, man.
That's great to hear, buddy. I'm really excited for tonight. We have a awesome treat for this evening. Tonight, we have a special guest that I'm proud to introduce, special FX legend, Rob Burman. Rob has worked with so many epic projects that have shaped our childhood. You might know him from such works such as John Carpenter's The Thing, Tremors, Terminator 2, Batman Returns, Power Rangers the movie, Donnie Darko, and Jackass the movie, plus so much more. Rob, it's an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast this evening.
Hi, how you doing?
We're doing great. Yeah, we're really psyched to have you on. You're actually our first special effects makeup type person, so we're pretty excited to ask you
I'm
some
a
questions.
lot of people's first.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
So okay.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask the same thing. So what how'd you get into makeup and special effects?
Well, it's interesting because I'm actually the third generation of my family to be in and around the industry. My grandfather back in the 1930s was a sculptor. He did monuments in the Midwest, in Nebraska, wow. Things like that. Big a war memorial, a giant Indian sending smoke signals, and all of this stuff. And then he decided that he would come to Hollywood to see if maybe he could try his hands in movies because, you know, he knew how to make things and all of that stuff. So he kind of became a scenic artist and a prop maker. He sculpted some carousel horses for the movie Carousel, and then he got a commission to do a film for, I can't remember the studio name, but basically they wanted him to make a cane. So he had to make a silver-headed cane, which was for, of all things, the Wolfman, and that's they killed the Wolfman with. Well, when he was working on that, he met Jack Pierce, who was doing the Wolfman makeup and everything, and Jack was kind of a fabricator. He built up on your face and things like that. He didn't sculpt and mold and pre-make and all of that. So he went to my grandfather and said, "Look, if you don't tell anybody, I'll keep you busy making stuff for me." So all the Jack Pierce stuff after the Wolfman was mostly my grandfather's work, all the crappy mummy masks and all of that stuff, everything through the 40s and the 50s, where everything started to get real cheesy and whatnot. Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, all that stuff. So my grandfather was doing that, making props and whatnot. And then when my father would be off for summer vacation in school, my grandfather would make him work in the lab. So my dad kind of learned how to make molds and all that stuff, throughout his childhood, having to assist my dad and doing fiberglass things. They did a giant elephant for a display and all of these things. So then then my dad got an apprenticeship working at 20th Century Fox. While he was there, within the first 6 months or so, Ben Nye, who was the head of the makeup department at the time, came in and said, "We've got a big show coming in. We've got all these things we've got to do, and who's the big guys? Who are the big lab guys around town? Who do we know?" And they said, "Who did the list of Adrian Messenger?" That was a lot of lab stuff and everything. They're like, "Well, the Westmores did that show and everything." And my dad, who was just an apprentice at the time, was sweeping around and says, "John Chambers was actually the lab guy on that show." And they're like, "Do you know how to get a hold of him?" He's like, "Well, yeah, he's in my neighborhood." He's like, "Well, call him, get him in here. Let's talk to him." So John comes in and starts and talks to Ben Nye, and he says, "Okay, great. Well, let's get started and let's do some tests." And they give my dad and John like a 4-foot by 8-foot table in the corner of the lab, and they started Planet of the Apes. So from there, obviously, my dad and John became an item together. They they left the studio system and started a studio together because they had a contract with the CIA, and they couldn't do CIA work while working in the studio. So they left the studios. Everybody told them they're crazy. They're never going to be able to make it. And, nobody works if you don't work at the studio. And so they were the first guys to leave the studio. Now nobody works at the studio. They're just, a rental lot.
Contracts, yeah.
So then along comes me, who I was like 4 when my dad was doing Planet of the Apes. But I grew up through the 70s when my dad and my uncle, who were pretty much inventing makeup effects at the time. The Devil's Rain, The Prophecy, all of these great films that had all of these monster suits, radio control, that nobody had ever done that before, doing all these different things. And then, so when I got in high school, I tried my hand at being a janitor for a company, and then I tried being a dishwasher for an ice cream parlor. All I wanted was money to be able to go out with my friends. But then after that, I went to my dad and I said, look, your studio's a mess. This is like Sanford and Son. I mean, there's stuff everywhere all the time. Why don't you let me and Dale, my best friend at the time, come in at night and clean your shop? We'll come in 3 nights a week, and you'll come in the next day to a nice clean place. They said, okay, that sounds good. They do that. So, in my senior year of high school, I would, after school at night, I'd go up and clean his shop on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And, so then I'd be in school on Tuesday or Thursday or whatever, and I'd get a call, or there would be I'd have to go up to the office and get a phone call from my dad saying, where'd you put this? Where'd you put that? Where's this? Where's that? I'd say, well, I put it here. I put it there. He'd say, come in after school. I'd say, I can't come in after school. I'm supposed to do this. And he'd say, no, I need you after school. So I started coming in part-time after school. And all I did was stock and clean and keep everything organized. But because of that, I knew how to work with everything. I knew what all the materials were. I knew how much to keep in stock. I knew how to clean them up. I knew what proportions to mix them in. I knew how to do all that stuff and assist everybody in doing all the things. So when I graduated high school, I just stayed. And so I stayed there for about the next year, and we did everything from Happy Birthday to Me, My Bloody Valentine, The Beast Within, Cat People. And then my dad goes to lay me off. And I'm like, well, I've been working a long time. I'm, doing that. I've been making pretty good money every week. And he's going to, because he's laying everybody off, there's no shows. And he gets a phone call from his friend Ken Diaz, who says, hey, we need a foam runner over here. Who you got? He says, well, my son's been doing all my foam lately. And, well, can you afford to lose him? Well, sure. So I go over and see Ken Diaz and meet with him and I can't remember, Eric Jensen. And they say, well, have you ever run big amounts of foam? And I'm like, well, yeah, I've run, 2 and 3, large mixers at a time. And I'm talking like Mixmaster, Sunbeam kind of, thing like that, maybe 300-400 grams of foam latex at a time. And they said, okay, great. Well, you're hired and all that. So let's come in. And I go into the foam room, and there are 3 20-quart Hobarts, big, giant monster. And I'm like, oh, shit. And it's for Rob Bottin on the thing.
Oh, my God.
And I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to do this for a while, And so after I finished that job, I went back to my dad's, and, that kind of just cemented me as the foam king for a long time. And once I got that reputation, it brought me Ghostbusters, it brought me The Fly, it brought me lots of other shows that, the Tremors and whatnot. So, so that's how I did it. I kind of fell in it accidentally.
I don't know if it was so much of an accident. I mean, you definitely had some really, really awesome people in your life that definitely got you in the right direction. That's so cool.
To be honest, it was the path of least resistance.
It's the easiest.
Yeah, it was, you know, and the truth is, as a foam runner, and this is what I tell my students all the time, foam is one of those things that if you can kind of get a hang of it and figure it out, it's not only the easiest thing to get good at, but it's the thing you will work all the time doing because nobody else wants to do it. And you'll become good at it really fast, and everybody will hire you because you all of a sudden become the foam guy, you know, or girl, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
what
so
exactly is like foam running? I'm not familiar with that. We're not really industry people. We just talk to industry people.
There are various stages of when you're doing a prosthetic. You're doing a makeup effect. You start with a life cast of somebody. You sculpt on the life cast, and this is really kind of breaking it down.
Mm-hmm.
You sculpt the look. You make molds of the sculpture. Then you cast foam latex or silicone, whatever it's going to be, into those molds. And then you would take those pieces and put them on somebody and paint them and all of that kind of stuff to make the effect. The foam latex part is casting it, and it's one of those things where it's iffy. You know, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. There isn't a set formula. Like you get the instructions and it says, well, they're suggestions, they're not instructions. They give you an idea of, well, you can put a little bit of this and a little bit of that and then do it for this long and see what happens. You know, well, if you can get good at that and figuring it out, which to me was easy, it was one of the easiest things I could ever do. It's like making meringue or whipped cream, you know. It's not really rocket science at all, but
you have to develop a feel for it.
Yeah, exactly. Or there are things that can go wrong when you're mixing foam, you know, without getting into too much boring detail about pH balance and all that stuff.
That sounds very interesting to me.
Foam, you whip up the foam or whip up the latex liquid into a frothy foam, and then you put a chemical in it that makes it congeal and solidify. If you mix it too long, it solidifies too fast. If you don't mix it long enough, it never solidifies. And if it doesn't, and if either one of those two things happen, you can't actually cast the prosthetic. You can't actually get the piece. So, so you have to get your timing right. Know just how much ammonia to have left in the mix, and on a hot day, you know, it's going to be different than cold days and rainy days, and so many different variables. You just need to learn how to roll with it, you know.
Now, you mentioned your grandfather did monuments. Are those monuments still around? Like, are you still able to see them?
Oh yeah, yeah. The War Memorial
awesome.
in Nebraska is still there, and they're in Lincoln, I think. And then the smoke signal statue is still there. Yeah, it's like 30 feet tall and 26 tons of concrete.
Oh, it's made out of concrete?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Where is that?
It's in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Lincoln, Nebraska. Cool.
Yeah.
Did I hear you correctly? Did I hear you say that your dad works for the CIA?
He did. Yeah. Well, if this is theoretical to a certain extent, but you know the movie Argo.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, the character in Argo that was the makeup artist guy, John Chambers, played by John Goodman.
Mm-hmm.
That was my dad's mentor. That was the guy who was sharing my dad's company together. It was John Chambers' studio at first, and it became the Burman studio. So if you metaphorically panned a little bit left in any of those shots with John Goodman, my dad would have been standing there. So he was that much a part of all that. They helped train agents. Agents would come to my dad and learn the techniques of how to do all this stuff in case they, you know, got stuck somewhere for disguises and all this stuff. So when they would learn this stuff, sometimes they would go, you know, this looks more fun than being in the CIA. Screw that. They'd quit the CIA and go and be a makeup artist.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What was the most difficult project you worked on? I mean, was it the thing when you were that young, or has there been like other stuff that's been really hard for you to work on?
Every project I've ever worked on had its problems.
Okay.
You know, for the thing, it was the working 3-4 days straight with, you know, not sleeping and, you know, or sleeping over in the corner of the shop and things like that, or, you know, coming in after a weekend or a month of making all these perfect cast heads and come in after the weekend and the mechanical guys had torn them all testing their mechanics, and we had to start over, but everything had to be shot by Thursday. You know, it's like,
Of course.
that kind of stuff. Power Rangers was in a lot of respects a nightmare. We were forced to work with a material that we told them in the beginning wasn't going to work, and you know, we had to back up ourselves. It's the one thing you really got to do in this industry to save your ass is back up everything with memos that have them sign off on everything. That when you tell them this isn't going to work and they say do it anyway, have them sign a piece of paper saying you wanted me to do this anyway, because it will if you don't, it'll bite you in the ass, and if you do, you might be able to get them for some more overtime. So, you know, every show has its has its difficulties. There's an occasionally one that you'll go through and you go, wow, that was easy. What happened?
Yeah, it's over already.
But it's rare.
Like the stuff that's like difficult, would it be like getting someone's like vision, like, and actually creating it, or like it would be more of the bureaucracy of like working with these type of people?
Most of the time it's bureaucracy. Most of the time it's logistics, and you know, I mean, what we're doing is inventing things that have never been seen before or done before. So you're kind of having to go out into a realm of the unknown. And so when you take on a job at the beginning and you say, yeah, okay, I'm going to make you a monster, and they sign you a check for, you know, $500,000 or something, and you go, okay, in 6 weeks, you're going to have a monster on set. All of a sudden your sphincter puckers up really tight and you start to go, how the fuck am I going to do this?
Now, when you're designing a monster or prosthetic, like how much creative control are you putting into like the aesthetics of that? Like, and how
Depends
much?
on the job.
Okay.
Depends on the job. A lot of times they come to me, and I actually prefer it when they have a clear-cut idea of what they want, because then it's easy for me to create that for them.
You don't have to deviate. You can just,
if they come in and they're like, well, we know what we don't want, that doesn't help me much, you know.
Yeah, do you have you had projects where it's not so clear and you've had to do like a lot of iterations because of that, because it doesn't quite hit?
How about a director who said, okay, well, what I want is I want these 9 different faces of this guy, and I want them all to be completely different, and I want them all to be scary.
That's it.
That was my direction. Different and scary. So,
got you.
So I got a bunch of sculptors that I knew, and I said, look, he's paying $100 or whatever for a sculpture. Do a sculpture. If he picks it, I can pay you, you know. And so I got like a dozen guys to come up with stuff, and I came in and I showed them to him, and he goes, what are we doing here? I didn't ask for this. I want, and I'm like, you want it different and scary? He says, yeah, these aren't different and scary. And I'm like, and every one of them was different and unique and all that stuff, and nothing like anything that anybody ever seen before. I'm like, fuck. Okay, well, so I went back and we changed a couple of them and redid them and all this stuff and changed it up and showed it to him, and he goes, oh yeah, that's a little better. That's better. Okay, so how many does that make that we have now? And I'm like, okay, well, right now we have these 2, and you know, and we only have 8 of the others. And he's like, what happened to the other 4? And I'm like, well, we changed them into these guys. No. Anything you show me, do not ruin. Make it.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. And every day he would call and completely change his mind about everything.
And so do you like when you're in a situation like that, do you push back on it and say like I need more detail or I need more this or that, or is there
It
space for you
depends
to
on
do
how
that?
I've set up the job. With this guy,
Gotcha.
in this case, I was smart because when I came in the beginning, I knew he was like this, and I said, "I'll tell you what, because you don't have an exact thing for me to do, and I can't give you an exact budget on not knowing exactly what you want. You guys just pay our salaries, pay us off every week, pay my overhead, which will include materials and everything, and we'll just do whatever you want every week." And we worked that way on a low budget film, only a few $1,000,000, for 7 months,
Oh
Oh
wow.
man.
going through roughly about $14,000 a week.
Wow.
9 people making shit, making stuff, make this, try this, okay, do that, go try that. No, not like that, do it like this, okay, try that. We needed, and it all started because I made him a 30-foot spider that he lost.
What do you mean he lost? Like physically lost it?
Like we made a 30-foot spider in 9 days, fabricated one, put it all together, shipped it off in a truck, waved goodbye. They called me 3 months later and said, "Do you have the spider?" No.
What spider?
And there, I actually said, "Did you check behind the couch?" It's a spider, fuck, you know. And so he says, they say, "Well, we'll call you back," and they call me back, and he wants to meet with you. Come in. I met with him, and he wanted me to remake the spider and handed me about 50 more effects.
Yeah.
And then we spent 7 months trying to do whatever it was that he wanted. And, you know, everything that we did is still pretty much still in his film, but it didn't get finished until after he died and somebody else edited it for him
Hmm.
because he was never going to finish it. I realized that if he finished it, he would have to say he directed a film and then show it to people. But if he didn't finish, he can say, "I'm
working.
directing a
Yeah.
film," and then he doesn't have to show anybody.
Hmm.
Did they ever find the spider?
No,
Oh man.
no, we made a new one.
Yeah. There's some 30-foot spider out there somewhere.
Yeah, yeah, like
That-
a rag puppet too. It didn't have any.
that'd be crazy to come across it in the landfill or something.
Gonna
So-
find it on some guy's porch for Halloween.
So Rob, when you're actually working on these films, are you working on set or you have your own studio and lab? You're saying so. I'm assuming they either send you what you want, what they want, and then you send it to them. Is it just back and forth like that, or?
Both.
Okay.
My preference is I love it when somebody comes to me with a film and says, "I got to do all these things. Can you make this stuff for me?"
Okay.
And then I stay in the lab and I do all that stuff and occasionally go to set to, you know, bridge that gap or what have you. That's my favorite stuff to do. And in fact, these days, I really don't take set work. You know, I'm teaching mostly and I'm doing my fine art stuff and doing other things that just, you know, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to do something, you know?
Yeah.
That being said, I've done some stuff with my brother. He's brought me in. He brought me in on Mission Impossible 3 to babysit some of his masks for a while. He brought me in just recently to do a life casting for some Netflix movie and whatnot. So I kind of keep current with that, but I mostly teach and mostly make stuff in my shop on my own.
Okay.
So if your brother does it as well, like does your whole family, because you said your uncle also does prop work or special effects work, like does anyone in your family not do special
My
effects?
dad and his brother,
Mhm.
Ellis Burman, he machined all the mechanical parts for the Terminator.
Okay.
Oh wow.
Then I have my mom's brother, who was the head of the makeup department on things like a lot of the 80s soaps like Falcon Crest and things like that. And then he was like NYPD Blue, and so he was the department head for the makeup on those shows. My mom had a company called Burman Industries, which is still going now, but we sold it. That sells all the materials that we use to make what we do. And then obviously my dad, and then there's my brother, who his big claim to fame, I guess, was the 2009 Oscar for Star Trek. And then there's me, who just, I've been doing everything for everybody, working for everybody, mostly working for other people more than on myself. My own stuff that I've done on my own, like Power Rangers and things like that, and Super Mario and whatnot. They're kind of few and far between, but I kind of like that. Sometimes being in charge is a real headache, and being the employee is a lot easier. It's like a vacation.
That's so crazy that you guys are such a dynasty of people that worked in this industry. I haven't really heard a lot of families like that.
If you threw a rock in Hollywood, you'd hit a Burman. my cousin, who is my Uncle Ellis's son, he's gone into sound and done that stuff instead. But yeah, we're all, I used to tell people we're kind of like the Westmore dynasty without a publicist.
So how's your work changed since you started with different technological advances and things like that? Has the way makeup is done changed quite a bit because of that?
I think it's all basically still the same. The materials have become more refined due to things like high definition, and the bar continually being raised for quality. It used to be that if somebody told you had to do a makeup that was going to have to play in front of real people as a live thing, and it was going to involve prosthetics or anything that was painted beyond just a little blush and eyeshadow, they'd tell you you're crazy. It works for film, it just does not work for the live eye. You never make it happen. Well, my brother's been doing Sacha Baron Cohen and getting away with it pretty damn well.
That's awesome.
So nowadays you can, with silicones and the advent of newer materials and high def materials, whatnot, you can get away with a lot more. Not that the old materials, like I said, with foam latex and things like that, not that they don't have their place. We found out when we did silicone did Star Trek in 2009 that if we did a silicone head the way we were trying to, sometimes we were putting 15 pounds of silicone on that guy's head. And I'm thinking, okay, this would have been much better in foam. It would have weighed ounces instead of pounds, but so we found ways around that as well. But everything has its place. They all have their toolbox, even with CGI, which has taken a huge chunk out of monster making and all of that. It hasn't eliminated it entirely. In my opinion, we should do everything live and do everything as good as we can, and do it with real puppets and do it with real creatures and suits and anything that we can, as much as we can, and then take all that footage and give it to the CGI guys and have them fix it.
Class it up.
Have to take everything that didn't quite work right, where you got a bad wrinkle and got all these things like that, and create and fix all of that and make it work that way. Everybody gets a job. Everybody gets to do the work, and the finished work is flawless and seamless.
And I actually 100% agree with you. If you look back at the Thing is one of my all-time favorite movies. The special effects in that movie hold up better than most movies nowadays. It just blows people
CGI.
away. Exactly, and it was all real effects, practical stuff, and I wish they kind of go back to that. I know it's way more expensive than the CGI, obviously, and it's a special craft. Like you even said, it's hard. It's not the easiest of things to do, but nothing looks like that, and it like would still scare the shit out of people nowadays. And like it's mind blowing what you guys did, and I wish we could go back.
Here's a good example that explains it in a different venue. I've been watching 80s action films lately. Watch the Blues Brothers movie and things like that. And I'm watching these car crashes where when you see it, you feel the impact of the vehicle.
The crunch and everything. Bang. Yep.
Just feel the hard and crunch, and you know that had to hurt, you know. And nowadays a car crash is a ballet. The car is flying through the air and everything's in slow
not realistic
motion.
Yep.
And you're knowing every single moment of every single thing that's happening, and you don't give a shit.
The creators get to use their own laws of physics too.
Big deal. So there's room for CGI, and that's great. And go ahead and use it. You know, CGI worked great in movies like Kick-Ass and all of that stuff, where all that stylish stuff works so well. I'm not against any of it, but at the same time, you don't always have to do it. Sometimes you really want to feel the impact. Sometimes you want to know what that's really like. Road Warrior. When Fez is up on top of the wall and he runs across and he does the big leap over and he grabs the guy and he headbutts him. There's a white frame in the headbutt. If you freeze frame it, it goes right through, and there's just one white frame. And when you watch the movie, you're like smack and you feel it. You're like, oh, that really hurt. And it's because there's this little one white frame in there that gives you this subliminal impact moment. And sells the whole effect. So
also with like newer technologies, I know 3D printing is becoming more and more popular. I mean, you cast like your molds. Do you think like you'll get to a point where you're just 3D printing these type of things?
Oh, sure. People are doing it all the time, and you know, it's fine. I find it heresy and a bastardization of the craft. I play with clay, mister. But there's, you know, again, there's a place for that too, and it's all well and fine. I think that when something comes out that's new, there are none so righteous as the newly converted, and the pendulum swings way over to that side, and everybody does everything, and then slowly but surely it ratchets back to the center. Sometimes swings the other way for a little while, just to, you know, you get a resurgence of the old way because everybody's like, down with the new way, you know. But there's a place for it. I don't push buttons to do what I do. You know, I make things. I like to make things with my hands and create that. I've never done ZBrush. wouldn't have a clue how to do it. I did Photoshop for one weekend because I was in a Photoshop workshop and they gave it to me to let me do all this stuff. And it's like, wow, I made a couple of movie posters and a couple of t-shirts. Wow, that was great. And then never touched it again.
So, yeah, you've touched a little bit on this already. What do you find most fulfilling about the work that you do?
Making stuff. You know, really, really, I don't know how to be more clear on it than that. That it really is. I like to make things. I've got 3 projects going on out there. I'm making a Tin Man statue. I'm making a self-portrait, and I'm making a Bride of Frankenstein makeup. And you know, I just got all these things going all the time because I just want to do them. I don't want to just sit and do nothing, you know.
So do you ever like feel like the challenge, like you need like someone challenges you to do something? Like, is that something that also drives you, or you just want to kind of like do your own thing?
It's the idea drives me. If all of a sudden I have an epiphany of, oh my God, I've got to do this. Like currently, my biggest thing is, what if Dorothy never showed?
Oh, for like Wizard of Oz?
Yeah.
What if
she never made it to Oz? What happened to the characters? What each one had their own thing going and all that stuff. First of all, the Wicked Witch of the East isn't dead.
Yeah, just get.
She's still terrorizing the Munchkins, you know. So she's still doing that, and she's still got them enslaved and all. Still making them dress in all those rainbow clothes and all that shit, which they hate, you know. The Scarecrow, he's probably had all his straw picked out, and there's nothing but a pile of clothes laying on the ground, you know. The Tin Man is still rusting out like an old Buick in the woods. He's probably got a family of raccoons living in his chest and a bird's nest in his head, you know. The Cowardly Lion never found his courage, so I think he's a junkie.
Better.
And I think
no girlfriend.
And I think the Wicked Witch of the West is his pusher. I think she's his deal. I mean, come on, poppies. Jesus Christ. You know?
It was a simpler time.
Exactly.
So it sounds like you really get into the contextual part of the realities too when you make these characters. So you're kind of existing on that realm while you're creating these things, right? Is that what
I absolutely do. That's the most fun part of all of it is creating that whole world and you know and developing the stuff around it. When I can make it on my own and things like that. When I'm doing it for other people, you know, if I'm following their design, that's one thing. But I'm also making it up like that. I've read that script and I'm like, okay, I know the creature lives in a cave. I know this and that. So that's going to influence this. And whatever research I can do based on the character, I'll devour all that research that I can, whether it's pictorial or literature, you know.
So you're literally kind of bringing things to life.
Yeah.
You're making,
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the job.
I want them to live.
like Geppetto. Yeah.
So I've actually
but I don't have to feed them.
Yeah.
So the actual special effects though, what happens when you're done with them? Like do they get destroyed? Do they get sold? Like these masks and molds, they just deteriorate over time?
The molds, I pretty much have lots of storage unit.
Okay.
I've got lots there. I get rid of some stuff that just doesn't really pertain, but I've got like my main molds from my main shows. Though I did actually auction off my molds for the Power Rangers.
Oh yeah.
So I don't have those anymore. But I have like the Super Mario Brothers molds and stuff from when I did Superboy years ago and all of that stuff. I've got most of that stuff.
You got any of them Catwoman cowls?
You know, I had 3 of them for a long time, and then a collector took them from me.
Okay. I heard you had to do like 36 of those, right? When you did that?
36 cowls, and I can't remember how many bat cowls, probably at least that many. And the 36 Catwoman cowls each had like 216 stitches on them.
Oh wow.
I had to fix each stitch because they sculpted them in, but when they came out in the foam rubber, they were a bubble there. So I had to cut the old stitch out and put a new stitch in on every single one of them. So I did most probably 90% of all the seaming and patching and fixing of all the Batman and Catwoman suits for that film.
For Jackass, what did you do for that? Was it the old men makeup? Like what was?
You know, it's funny. I get a lot of references for that, but that was a 2-day job. One day I came in and helped prep things in the shop, and then the next day I was on set. I applied Ryan Dunn's hands.
Okay.
My friend James Rowland did the face. Actually, we both did the makeup together, but he was the lead on it. I assisted him for that.
It's just funny you get questions about that all the time, and it was a very small job in your
minor
life.
thing, like a blimp.
Yeah.
This, really?
My biggest story about that is seeing Steve-O staple his balls to his thigh. You know, other jobs too. Like all I did was sculpt, and then somebody else, the guy who I worked for, changed it a little bit afterward for the director. But I get a lot of reference for. Wow, you did Donnie Darko?
Yeah, that was our next question.
Yeah.
I will honestly say, silliest thing I was ever been asked to sculpt. Yeah. I as I was sculpting, I'm like, he can't be serious. He's like, yeah, no, he's loving it. He's loving it. It's great. I'm like,
did you do the rabbit? Is that what?
yeah, the Frank.
Yeah.
Frank the rabbit's just mask. And I'm like, so what's his costume look like? Oh, it's a big fur bunny suit.
Yeah, you're like, hey, y'all know I did a 30-foot spider, right?
Yeah.
Still out there.
Yeah.
You know, like I did it twice actually. Yeah.
So what is the one thing you're really like proud of that you think you definitely went over the top with? Will be the one project?
Well, each thing I make, I love a lot of the things that I make, you know. Mostly it would be my art things that I make on my own that I'm the most proud of. But I would say if you're talking film, my best moment is actually a great story. Was working for my brother on Mission Impossible 3. He brought me in to babysit the Philip Seymour Hoffman masks that he had made for the transformation for Tom Cruise to put on and all of that. There's a box that they had done that, you know, the mask is in and it's supposed to, you know, mill the mask and all that. And they take the mask out of the box and they put it on Tom Cruise. And, you know, and then voila, he's Philip Seymour Hoffman. So I'm on set just watching the mask. My brother is offset. He is doing the makeup on Philip Seymour Hoffman, so he can do the mask pull off thing. And it's just a neck prosthetic to pull like this. And, you know, okay, great. And then I hear them calling for my brother, and I'm like, well, so I'm going to go check this out, find out what's going on. And I come in, and they say, and I say, you looking for Barney? He's not here. He's making up Philip. And they said, great. Can you do anything with these masks? I'm like, sure. What do you need? Well, the eyebrows kept popping off every time because they didn't want them permanently attached at first, but then they decided they needed them permanently attached. So that was all. Not that big a deal, but you know, and I'm like, okay, well, I can probably do that. And I know that they're doing $65,000 a minute to shoot that movie.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, okay. I looked at him and I said, well, I need 5 minutes. And I look up and it's the first AD. It's J.J. Abrams, Tom Cruise, Ving Rhames, the head of Paramount, Michelle Burke, the makeup department head, and my brother's assistant, Hugo. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, I just asked for, oh, fuck, I don't know how much money is that, 300 something $1,000. And like, and they like, and the first AD looks at his watch and goes, shit, okay. All right, we'll see if we can find some other things to do. What are we going to do? And I looked at Hugo and I said, go get me some gelatin and mix it on the way back. He comes back and I take it and I put a little bit on there and get it and I stick the eyebrows down and I see that they're stuck and it's about 2 minutes because I know it takes 5 minutes for this stuff to set. And I know it's about 3 minutes and it's setting and it's almost there. And so I go up to the first AD and I go, okay, I'm done. It's ready. And he looks at his watch and goes, you're 2 minutes early. And I walked away going, yes, I just saved you $130,000 because I am a professional. And then I turned around and I thought, I can't believe I just asked for $180,000 or something like that. But you know, at the same time, I saved them $130,000. So
Yeah.
that was a great moment. That's one of those, you know, moments in your career where you feel just perfect. You know, you saved the day around
like the hero.
all the greatest people you can think of in the moment. You know? So yeah, that's probably my favorite moment to date.
So you've already worked on so many awesome franchises and stuff like that. Do you have like a dream franchise you haven't worked on yet that you want to work on?
I never worked on any of the Star Wars stuff.
Okay.
I never got any of that.
I mean, you've done Star Trek, so I mean, you're really missing the Star Wars.
We did quite a bit on Star. I mean, I did Star Treks because we did at my dad's. We did Star Trek 3. We did. I was at Makeup Effects Labs on 5, and with Ed French on 6. My company did some costumes for Insurrection, which is 9. You know, so I've been pretty good into the Star Trek universe, but no Star Wars, not at all. I did 2 weeks at Stan Winston's working on Terminator stuff, so I got that in there. You know, a little bit of everything, a little bit of everywhere.
Okay. Has there been anything you've like turned down that you regret it that you turned down?
Not really turned down. I can't remember turning down much of anything. I turned down a sumo wrestling rink, but that's because I really didn't know how to make one or what they needed. And you know, afterward I saw what they are. I'm like, is that all? I didn't want to do that.
Anything you worked on you wish you did turn down then?
There's been shows where you just wish you could fire yourself. Sure, you know. I did a throat lozenge commercial where by the end I knew what I had made wasn't going to fly, and I gave them their money back and said, I'm sorry. I've always been legit like that. If I feel like it's not going right or something's wrong and anything like that, I'll be the first one to tell them.
That's admirable. So you said you do a lot of teaching as well, right?
Sure. Yeah. I've been doing that. Most of what I've done for the last 10 years has been our generic prosthetic company, Rubberware, and then teaching. I did a bunch of years with a class over at the Joe Blasco School when they were still going, and worked for a couple of schools. And now I realize that you don't ever work on a job in a classroom. So why would you ever teach somebody in a classroom? I teach them in my lab, and so sometimes there's shows going on around you. You know, there's all of that happening, and you get an idea of what it's like to be in a professional environment, working in a professional method and in a professional way.
Is that an apprenticeship kind of situation when you're teaching in the?
I have done that over the years, but now I have a 1 week, a 2 week, and a 4 week course that I do. So somebody could do all 7 weeks if they wanted to, but I travel them too. I've also this last few years, and hopefully still again this year, I've been going to Europe, to Vienna and to Cologne, Germany, and doing week classes there, and you know, wherever they want me. If somebody wants to sponsor a class, I'll give them a contract, say this is what you need to do, and we make it happen. It's actually really a lot easier than it seems.
It's really cool the opportunities you get when you attain mastery in something, right?
Well, you know, if I tell my students that once you learn how things are made, because when you make prosthetics in my course, you know, that's making a certain kind of thing in a certain kind of way, but you really do get a great overview on how everything is made, how, you know, pieces of your car had to have been made, and you look at things, you go, look, somebody had to sculpt that thing, and somebody had to make that, and how would they, you know, once you get an idea of how things are really made, your life changes. You look at everything differently. You know, I'm the guy that stands at Disneyland and leans against a rail and goes, hey, wait a minute, that's not wood, that's fiberglass. Look, you can see a seam right here. And you know, I'm the one that sees how everything is made when I go to places, and my students start doing that. They come back to me and they go, you know, I really noticed about the knobs on the radio in my car. And you know, I'm like, well, yeah, that stuff, everything, you know. So it really does give everybody a whole new eye-opening point of view and perspective on life.
That's really cool. It's kind of lets you see beyond the veil.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hey, there is more to it than just the surface of, oh wow, I got a nice box. Well, there's something in that box, Really? It's not just a picture of a nice clown on the outside.
Yeah, it's really cool seeing how everything connects. Like that's cool that there's so much there's so much application to just ingesting life in general from just like most a lot of creations probably that way. A lot of kind of, because you get to see, like, you kind of gain insight into just what it means for a human to create, and so like anything and everything is created by some human, right? At least the stuff that
90% of us go through life not paying attention to it. I don't want to say oblivious. I don't want to make it a negative connotation, but most of us just don't pay attention to that.
You just don't think about it. Like,
it's just there. We don't think about electricity until the grid goes down, and then it's like, wait a minute, in your whole life. I mean, I know for me, if I come home and I turn on my TV and it doesn't turn on, I just about lose it. It's like, no, my evening, I can't do this. But I don't want to read a book.
So, Rob, you worked on like the special effects side of the film industry and television industry. Have you worked on any other stuff like writing, directing, producing, acting, any of that?
The closest I came to that, well, I did do a cameo in the old Superboy TV series.
Okay.
Playing a monster that fights Superboy. So that was fun. Not many people can say they got to fight Superboy. And then I did a cameo in another friend of mine's film as a crazy man being yanked into an asylum. That I'm there for 5 seconds. But I'm not really much of an in front of the camera kind of guy, except in the early 90s, I did a series of how-to videos teaching how to do what I do.
I came across those on YouTube, actually. I was going to ask you about that.
I did those. And
you had a beautiful, luscious red beard also.
Back when my hair was red and on my head. But I did those. They never got to DVD. There was some rights issues with them for a number of years, and I only in the last maybe 10 years got the rights back to them and all of that. But as good as they are, and they're still current, the information on them is still what we would do today.
Timeless.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I updated. I'm doing another version. I always said back then, if I'm going to do another one, I'm going to do this one. And so just this year, actually, because of the pandemic, and I'm like, well, I'm here. I might as well, and it's kind of hard to get students to come for a month-long class. So I condensed that month-long class into how-to video, and I'm getting ready to stream that actually on my website.
Awesome.
We'll link that in the show notes.
When is that being released?
I don't know yet. We just finished shooting it. I just recorded the dialogue for it, all the voiceover, and it's being edited, and insert diagram stuff's being put into it and all of that. So I'm not rushing it. I'm going to take my time so that when it's what I want, I'll put it up, so I'm not exactly sure when it's going to get put up. Still trying to figure out how to put it up without people stealing it and throwing it on YouTube.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem with a lot of things nowadays on YouTube. It's so easy for people just to steal and just put it on for themselves. It's terrible.
Yeah, and they have no guilt. They have no conscience about it.
Doesn't matter to them. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we'll see.
So you mentioned like you like making monsters. It seems like you like making like the monsters and stuff like that. Is that what you prefer to do for your special effects stuff? Is like that monster type work?
Well, I don't like doing regular makeup. Okay.
Your wife doesn't make you do her makeup?
Yeah, no, she is way smarter than that, because I usually bring her in to finish my makeups. If I want something nice and beauty over the top, or a little kind of fine finish, I'll usually let her finish it, or let one of my student assistants or something in class. I'll go, hey, okay, now here, take this. Now, why don't you, and let them finish it off, and that way it includes them, and then I don't have to do the part I hate. I really don't like painting to begin with. I would much rather just play with clay and
sculpt,
do all
yeah.
of that. But you have to paint sometimes. And actually, I spent all day painting today, so I can't hate it that much.
Do you sell sculptures that you make? Do you have like a shop or anything that you sell stuff online?
If you look at if you go to robburmansculpture.com, you'll see the stuff that I sell.
Okay.
My fine art pieces, my bronze work, my lifelike figures, things like that, and some of my one of a kinds and whatnot.
How long have you been doing bronze work?
Let's say 2004-ish or something like that. I discovered Da Vinci's grotesques, and so I started taking those drawings and sculpting those people, because I wanted to know what they looked like in 3D, not just a profile. Like, I know this guy looks like somebody I know, but who is it? And I would finish the sculpture, and it would look like people I knew or famous people. I've got one that looks like it looks like Whoopi Goldberg and Joe Camel had a baby. But so I did those in bronze, and then an art manager came to me asking for needing some realistic stuff done, some figure work and whatnot. So I showed him he needed just somebody to do the lab tech stuff, to cast and do all of that. But when he saw my bronze grotesques, he fell in love with them, and asked me to sculpt for him too. So I started doing live figures, realistic characters that are a little bit cartoonish. They're, I like all my stuff to be a little tongue in cheek, little bit of attitude. I like all my characters to be mashups. Even my makeups. My makeups, when I do my makeups for class, I don't do a standard makeup. I do a mashup. I do this guy as that. My one of my favorites was I did the Hunchback of Notre Dame as a miniature golf pro.
That sounds awesome. That's one of your grotesques in the background there, isn't it?
You're looking at, it's probably Harry.
Harry, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of my Da Vinci grotesques. And again, all they are is a profile drawing that Da Vinci drew. And so I take and I sculpt that profile. And if you do it right, and you get all of Da Vinci's lines right, and get all of everything proportionally proper, just the way he did it, and then turn it straight onto you, you've got half a face already. But if your lines aren't quite right, or something's not going, when you turn it straight, the illusion doesn't work, and it doesn't happen. So once I got it right, and I found that illusion was right, then I just duplicated the other side to find out who these people were.
So you said you started working right after high school. I'm assuming you didn't go to college then for fine art, or so this is all just self-taught, or you just worked around like
I learned on the job.
Okay.
Yeah, on the job, and books, and watching people. I became a great mold maker, all modesty aside, because I watched great mold makers. Gunnar Ferdinandson and Richard Ruiz, and people that were just phenomenal at what they did. And I didn't make molds with them at first. I just watched them, like on Ghostbusters. I just watched them make molds, and then after that show, I went back to my dad's shop and I started making molds for him. And when I did, my molds were amazingly and infinitely better than anything that I had made before I left, because I just from absorption, seeing it.
So with I'm really interested in this bronze work. how quickly did all of your how quickly did it were you able to pick that up from with all of your experience? It seems like that's a very different than forming clay and things like that.
Well, it is, and there's a quick way to getting to be able to learn how to do all of that, and it's called you make the sculpture and you make the mold, and then you take the mold to the foundry, and then they cast the waxes, do all of the casings and all that stuff, and pour the bronze and do all the metal work and the patina and give you back a finished bronze.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, I don't do that work myself.
Oh, so you don't have a foundry out back where you're melting?
No. It's
I was
way
like,
more
man, this
work
is.
that I'm into. You know, I kind of wish I did, because right now the cost for doing my pieces is so much that my profit margin is really shrunk to almost nothing.
Oh no.
You know, so it's it makes it tough, because you know the amount of the work the foundry has to do is, you know, it's a lot of labor what they have to do. They cut the pieces apart and do all kinds of things that I had no idea that they did at first. And so I'm like, I don't begrudge them their money, but at the same time, for my, you know, to be able to sell it, theoretically I should be able to double the bronze cost for my profit. And there's no way I could do that. If I doubled the bronze cost and then sold that to the founder, or sold that to the gallery, and then the gallery doubles that again,
yeah,
all of a sudden $200 bronze or a $500 bronze piece costs $2,000 at the gallery, and nobody's going to pay that, you know.
I don't know. Maybe
try it, see what happens.
Yeah,
well, if I had a big enough name and I had a piece that was desirable enough, I know that my inklings, which, you know, you'll see on my site, are a little climber and a skier and all these things. They're only about 3 pounds of bronze or what have you, but they're retailing right now for upwards of $1,200 and $1,300.
Oh wow, nice.
Even with my little tiny little minute profit. The gallery and the foundry make all the money on those.
Yeah, but it's cool that like it's so different that, I mean, I guess it's really not that much different than what you're currently doing with like the model work and then doing the makeup and the special effects. It's just a different medium.
I think the difference is that you kind of have to, you know, I guess wait for the work to come when it's an effects job. You got to wait for a job that needs you. Whereas with the bronze work, you're creating it all on your own and deciding what you want yourself up front. And, you know, you don't have anybody telling you what to do. You don't have anybody, you know, giving you parameters saying, you know, move that eyebrow over 1/4 of an inch, will you? Like, yeah, okay, no.
All right, Seamus, do you have any other questions? I know we're getting to that time. I don't want to keep Rob here all night.
Damn.
No, I think I'm good at this point.
Rob, it's been awesome. We really appreciate this. This was so cool. Oh,
one thing. I'm sorry. You touched on this a little bit, but like, what would be your like one piece of advice you give to someone who wants to get into the work that you do?
I absolutely push learning, and this is the hardest thing for me to teach as a teacher. Learn to see. Sounds really kind of vague and kind of esoteric and all of that, but the truth is, you know, if I give somebody a piece of clay and say, sculpt me a nose, a lot of times it comes back looking very much like the tail of an airplane. It's got fins on it and long straight things, and I'm like, what's this? They're like, it's a nose. Well, what are these? Oh, those are the nostrils. Yeah. No, learn to see proportions, learn to see what's in front of you in the real world, all around, you know, in nature and all that. If you're going to study things and you're going to practice realism. Don't practice fantasy. Don't make monsters. Don't do any of that. Do realistic things, old ages, and do stuff as real as you can. Because if you master realism, all your fantasy stuff is going to look real. But if all you know how to do is make fairies and goblins and orcs and things like that, you're never going to be able to do something real. 90% of your work as a makeup artist is going to be realism. You know, it's fun to make monsters. It's great. But, you know, 3 guys are going to make a living making monsters. Everybody else is going to have to learn to do everything else too. You know, learn the skills, learn to do the things right. I tell people in my new video that if you're going to do, if you want to do this kind of stuff like that, you know, that's great. There's a lot of sculptors out there. There's a lot of painters out there, because everybody wants to paint and everybody wants to sculpt. That's great. So all your competition is going to be painters and sculptors. Nobody wants to make molds. Nobody wants to run foam rubber. Nobody wants
Not
to
the sexy.
seam and trim and patch. And nobody wants to do the work that takes skills. That's 90% of the job. If you're a sculptor, you work in the beginning and then you're laid off. And then if you're a painter, you get hired at the very end, and it's usually a rush job because everybody else took too long getting it done, and you got to slam out a paint job overnight. Everybody else, the skilled guys, the lab techs, they work the whole job. They work in the beginning. They get to help sculpt because they're there for the life cast in the beginning. They get to help paint and finish and detail because they've been on the job the whole time and they know everything that's going on. You know, those are the guys that make the money on the show. You know, you may be a great sculptor, you may be a great painter, but can you make a good mold? I can make a great mold. I can run good foam latex. I can trim a good seam. I can do all of the stuff on the job that needs to be done so that I don't get laid off.
Thank you for those words. I mean, hopefully, that's really good advice for people.
That was great. Yeah, Rob, thanks a lot for coming on. It was a great.
Anytime.
It was great. Yeah.
You guys want to come back? I'm here. Now I know how to Zoom. So
to open up your whole world.
Well, now it's downloaded on my computer. I guess I can use it.
Rob, where can our listeners find you at? Do you have any websites or Instagram?
Yeah, you can find my web. I've got websites all over the place. My Instagram, Rob Burman's Lab, Rob_Burman's_lab. Rob Burman's Laboratory at Instagram. Rubberware is our big, you know, that's my bread and butter. That's what we sell, generic prosthetics all over the world. And then I have my Facebook pages, and Rob Burman is a big footprint. I'm all over the place.
All right, Rob, we really do appreciate you coming on. Have a great night.
Yeah, you too. Have fun.
Rob. Thanks a lot. Bye.